good. We're just going to continue that atmosphere the rest of our time together. Thank you so much for being here. If you're new, welcome. My name is Brian. I'm the pastor. And at Pathway, we simply want to help you to know God, to find family, and to make a difference. That's what we're all about as a church in a nutshell. So, man, again, thanks for coming and being with us today. We're in the middle of a series that's going to take us right up to Easter. In fact, you want to be here next week because my wife, Cranda, is going to be speaking on Ruth chapter 3. So that'll be fun. But we're in the middle of a series on this book of the Old Testament of the Bible called Ruth. And she's the main character, obviously, for the most part. And what's unique about Ruth is that there's 66 books in the Bible divided between New and Old Testament. And of those 66 books, only 2 of them are named after women. And what's even more unique is that Ruth is the only non-Jewish book named after a non-Jewish person in the entire Old Testament of the Bible. And if that's not enough for you, Ruth's great-great-great-great-grandson is King Jesus. And so really amazing stuff. And so we've been looking at that. We started the first few weeks looking at chapter 1. Today we'll cover all of chapter 2. But if you're joining us really quickly, chapter 1 tells you almost all you need to know in the first sentence. It says in Ruth chapter 1, verse 1, that in the period when judges ruled Israel, and there's a comma, there was a severe famine on the land. And when Judges ruled Israel, the book before Ruth is called Judges. And they're not necessarily like judges like we think of in a court, the judicial system. That was part of it. But really they were military leaders. They were spiritual leaders mainly. And then they were also judicious as well. And they were kind of all three rolled in to one. And so God would raise up these various judges to help draw the nation of Israel back to worshiping him. And sometimes that would work. Most of the time it didn't. The judge might be good for a while, and then they would fall into immorality, into sin, and then the nation would follow that as well. And God had said earlier in the Old Testament that as long as you're faithful to me and worship me and love me, I'm the God that provides the rain. I control the weather. And if you'll just ask me, I'll give you rain, and that'll help your crops, and you'll eat, and you'll be fat and happy, and things will be great for you. But if you choose, when you get into the land of Israel, to worship the false demonic gods around you, of the other nations around you, then I can't help you. Because you're choosing not to ask me, you're asking these false demonic gods. And so let's see if they can bring the rain. And the answer is they can't. And so it tells you in the time when judges ruled Israel, the severe famine means that the nation of Israel was in great immorality, great sin in the nation. And as a result, the famine was so severe that a husband named Elimelech, his wife named Naomi, and their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, say, enough of this sin and this immorality. We got to go where there's some food. We're starving to death as well. So they go about 75 miles east into the land of Moab, which is modern-day Jordan. And they're in the land of Moab for about 10 years. And during that time, Mahlon and Chilion married 2 Moabite women. And so, that's not great because they're not Jewish women. And so probably mom and dad wanted to marry some good Jewish women. And they don't. They marry Moabites. And the Moabites and Israelites were not friends. They weren't outright enemies, but they certainly were not friendly really at all. And so they married 2 Moabite women, which is a major faux pas of the day. And it says that after about 10 years, the 2 boys die, and the husband, the dad, he dies as well, leaving Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law as widows. And after that they hear that there's food again back in Israel, so they go back to Bethlehem. And as they go, Naomi tries to get Ruth and Orpah, the other daughter-in-law, to stay behind. And Ruth and Orpah initially are like, no, we want to go with you. And Naomi persists. And finally, Orpah says, okay, I'll go back home to my family, to my culture. And Orpah's name in Hebrew means back of the neck. And as we said at the end last week, what do you do in your life when you're at your most vulnerable, at your darkest hour, when people who you thought you could count on, you see the back of their neck as they walk out of your life? And that's where Naomi is. But she's got Ruth. Ruth clings to her and makes one of the most powerful statements in the entire Bible. She says, you can't get rid of me, in essence. I'm going to go wherever you go. I'm going to die where you die. I'm going to be buried in the plot next to you. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And what she's saying is, I will forego, I will never see my family again. I'll never see my relationships and my culture again. I'm turning my back on all of that. And not only that, I am converting, as it were, to worship your God, the God of heaven, the Yahweh, the God of the Bible. So I'm turning my back on all these false gods to worship the God of the Bible. And also in that speech, she's saying, I pledge or vow to serve you the rest of my life. Which for Ruth meant, if I'm vowing to serve you the rest of my life, that means I vow that I'll never get married again. I'm never going to have kids again. I'm going to be an old widow. I'll die as an old widow in a foreign land. I'll be a foreigner. I have no money. I have no rights. I have nothing. I'm going to die as a foreigner. And Naomi, when they get back to Israel, to Bethlehem, Naomi says to all of her friends, they're like, oh, hey, you're back. It's good to see you. It's been 10 years. And Naomi says, don't call me Naomi, which means pleasant. Call me Mara, which means bitter. And so what do you do in your life when, and Naomi says that the hand of the Almighty, the hand of God is raised as a fist against me. What do you do when you feel like, God, I'm serving you, I'm being faithful to you, and it feels like your fist is raised against me? And Naomi says, I left full, but I've returned empty. I'm bitter. What do you do when you're bitter? You've been faithful to God. You've done all the Christian things you're supposed to do, and yet for whatever reason, it's not working out, and you're bitter. That's Naomi. Well, normally what we would do, we would read the whole thing and then go back and break it down. But today we're going to look at all of it. But in my view, there's three main scenes or acts, as it were, acts of a play. And we're going to look at each of them individually and break it down as we go along. So here's the first main thought, by the way. I think you could sum up the entire book of Ruth in this one statement, especially chapter 2. And that is this: your character matters. The big theme of Ruth is character. Your character matters, has huge ramifications, as we see in all of Ruth. But look at Ruth chapter 2, verse 1. Now there was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's husband, Elimelech. So the first thing we find out is there's a guy named Boaz. That's a cool name. But secondly, that we find out he is wealthy and he's a relative. How many of y'all thankful for some rich relatives in your life? How many wish you had some rich relatives in your life? I mean, that's them. And so we find out Boaz. Before we know anything else, we know he's wealthy and he's a relative. And that'll come back to play a little bit this week, but mainly next week and the week after. But here's what's interesting. Again, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew, so sometimes things get a little lost in translation. Notice that it says he was wealthy and an influential man. Now, why that matters is because in Hebrew, it doesn't say influential man. In Hebrew, it literally says he is a mighty man of valor. So my question is, you've just told me, verse 1, that who Boaz, we know his name, we know he's wealthy, he's from Bethlehem. But why is he, my question is, a mighty man of valor? Why would the Bible call him a mighty man of valor? And the rest of the day today, you're going to see big time hints as to why he gets that designated marker for his name. One, we know that he's wealthy, but that doesn't make him a mighty man of valor. We know a lot of wealthy people in American culture that are anything but mighty men of valor, right? So wealth doesn't mean you're a mighty man or woman of valor. And also, I would say this. What's interesting about him, and when you turn the first page of the New Testament, Matthew chapter 1, verse 5 talks about Boaz's great-great-mother, grandmother. Her name was Rahab. She was a prostitute from Jericho. So it's really interesting. He's a mighty man of valor, but why? Well, it says he has a great reputation in the community. He was a great businessman. And we're going to see throughout the day today, he was very good to his employees, and he was extremely generous to the poor, to those in need. But most of all, I mean, that's great that he's a great businessman. It's wonderful that he takes care of his people. It's great that he's generous to the poor. All those are great characteristics. But they all sum up this one main thought, and that is he's a godly man. What it means to be a mighty man of valor in the Bible, the biblical sense, isn't how much you can bench press, isn't what great things you can make with your hands. What makes you a mighty man of valor is that you are on fire for the Lord. You're a man of godly character and integrity and holiness and righteousness, a man of God of his word, a man of God of prayer. And can I just speak to the men just for a moment? The number one thing that your family needs from you and wants from you, whether they say it or not, is not your paycheck. They may say, but they don't need your paycheck. The number one thing they need from you is not to provide or be funny or have a great personality. All that's wonderful. Whether you're dating or married, the number one thing that your family needs from you is to be a mighty man of God, to be a man of prayer, to be a man of God's word, to be a man of integrity and holiness, to be a mighty man of valor in my home. And I only get that through being a man of God. And look, the more I'm a mighty man of God, then I'll have a great reputation in the community. Then that'll help me be a great businessman. That'll help me be more generous to the poor. But it all starts with being a mighty man of God first. Hope this could be said of you today. Verses 2 and 3. One day Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go out into the harvest fields and pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who is kind enough to let me go do it." Naomi replied, "All right, my daughter, go ahead." So Ruth went out and gathered grain behind the harvesters. A couple things. Remember last week at the end, Ruth's powerful speech to Naomi. Wherever you go, I'll go. Wherever you die, I'll die. I'm going to serve you in a sense. I'll serve you the rest of your life, the rest of my life. And now she's backing it up with her actions. In other words, it's one thing for her to give this great, beautiful speech, and then they get back to Bethlehem, and then Ruth's like, "Naomi, I don't know anybody here. You do. I have no connections. I'm a foreigner. So, you know what, Naomi, you need to help me with some relationships, some connections. I don't know how to get a job. I don't know anybody. So, Naomi, you need to do that." No, Ruth takes initiative. She is a woman of God now. She said, "Your God is my God." And instead of just talking the talk like chapter 1, now she's walking the walk as well. She doesn't just say, "I'll serve you and be faithful to you." Now she's backing it up with her actions. Talk is cheap. Actions speak louder than words. And Ruth now, the spotlight is on her today. Ruth is backing it up. You can make a great speech about how you love the Lord and how you're a generous person and how you'll be faithful and how you got somebody's back and you're right there for them. But when the tough times come, where are you then? When the hard times come, do you really back it up with your actions? That's the beauty of Ruth, is that she proves it by her actions. Ruth is a foreigner and a widow. She has two big strikes against her. She is the lowest of the low in the pecking order here. She's a widow and a foreigner. No one to look after her, no one to protect her. She doesn't know anybody, has no connections. And yet, Ruth doesn't say, "Well, we'll just pray and God will provide. We'll just pray really hard and God will bring us food. He'll just drop it off at our doorstep." Now, that does happen in the Bible at times. But one of the things that we admire about Ruth is she's a woman of initiative. She doesn't tell Naomi to do it. She says, "I told you I'd take care of you back when we were leaving Moab, and now I'm going to prove it. I don't know what field to go to. I'm just going to pick one. But you stay here, Naomi. You're older. You stay here. I'll go provide for you." She takes initiative. Sometimes in our life, we say, "Oh, God, would you provide? Oh, God, would you make a way?" And God is very lovingly saying, "I'll make a way when you get out of the way and take that first step." So sometimes God is saying, "I'll bless you and provide." God didn't bless Ruth and Naomi as long as they stayed at home. That the moment that Ruth began to step out and work in the field, God began to bless them. Can I just say a biblical concept that's all throughout the Bible? God does bless hard work. He really does. Chat GPT all day. But God blesses hard work. It's a biblical concept. And that anything that you do for the Lord, it's God will bless when you honor him with your work. In fact, work is referenced in this chapter alone over 11 different times. It's all over the place. One of the things about Ruth is her character is that she has a strong work ethic. Instead of saying, "God, would you bless me?" she steps out, take the first step of hard work, and then God begins to bless her. Look at verse 3. "And as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father-in-law, Elimelech." I love that it says, "and as it happened." The Bible clearly does not believe in chance or fate or luck or happenstance. That's so unbiblical, I would say borderline demonic. The Bible says that God orchestrates the steps of those who love him. And that's what's happening here. This is the Bible's way of being a bit funny, a bit tongue-in-cheek, like, it just so happened. It's sarcastic, right? No. That Ruth, in her mind, is, I got to go to work. And so she gets up, there's 10, 20 different fields I could choose from. I'm going to pick that one. And she begins to go to work. But what she didn't realize, think about this, as Ruth is going out to do this very degrading work, this very mundane work, this work where she is ignored, she's marginalized, she is the lowest of the low, just literally grabbing scraps, just enough to survive that day. We would think of it maybe as even dumpster diving, just to survive, to feed Naomi first and whatever's left to feed her. As she's doing that, she thinks she just randomly pick a field, but God says, no, I'm going to orchestrate your steps. It's not a random field. I'm going to use the field that you go to work in to end up saving you in the end. Be careful that you never look down your nose at the mundane things of your life. Don't look down your nose at just, well, it's just a job. Look, if you're a follower of Jesus, I believe it's not just a job, that God is ordaining your steps. And God, if it was just a job, he can get you money any way he needs to. But God has you strategically placed there so that you can reach those people for Jesus, so that you can be a man or woman of valor, of character and integrity to show them who Christ is, to reach them for him. That's the idea. What's fascinating as well is that Ruth, God never speaks to anybody directly in this whole book. God never directly tells Elimelech to leave Bethlehem. God never tells Naomi to go back home to Bethlehem. God never tells Ruth to go work in this particular field. But yet the hand of God is using their seemingly everyday mundane work to orchestrate the birth of the Savior of the world. Be careful that you're not saying, well, it's just, hey, I just stay home and homeschool the kids. No. God is going to use that to impact your kids' life. Well, I just sell insurance on the side. No. God's going to use that. Well, I'm just a school teacher. I'm a CEO. Whatever it is in your life, that when you serve God faithfully, the New Testament says, whatever you do, whether you eat or drink or sleep, wherever you do it for the glory of God. Because it could be in your work that God helps to save you and to save other people and use it for his divine purpose. I mean, Ruth didn't go down and say, are you kidding me? Picking up grain in the field, dumpster diving, that's beneath me. I'm not going to do that. Get somebody else to do it, God. No, she says, God, if that's where you have me, I'm going to be faithful with that. God, whether I'm just picking up grain and everybody knows my name, I'll be faithful. And when I'm marginalized on the edges of the field and no one knows who I am, I'll be faithful. No matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, I'll be a woman of God and I'll be consistent and I'll be faithful. Like, just be faithful. Your name's on the presentation. Be faithful. You're given to be faithful. You're just in the back room in the basement with no windows and you're just doing whatever all alone with the mold and the asbestos. Just be faithful. Get another job maybe, but just be faithful, right? Just be faithful where he's got you. It wasn't glamorous. It was hard work. It was degrading, but she was faithful. Understand this. It was the job that was the test of her character. Have you ever thought that God could be using your job to test your character? Well, I know that I had my buddy clock in for me because I was a little late today. That's testing your character. And you failing, by the way, all right? Well, the company, they'll never notice this. I mean, if I charge a little extra on the card that wasn't, they'll never know. They don't appreciate me. God is using your job to test your character. And when you prove faithful, he will open up windows of abundant blessing because that's exactly what happens to Ruth. Ruth doesn't get the blessing. She's going to here in a moment. But when she starts to work that day in the field, there's no mention of blessing. But after a hard day's work and her faithfulness and her character, when no one was looking, and her test of character in that, God began to bless her. Can you be proven in the small things? Don't ask God for more when you're not faithful with the little he gave you. I mean, this is all over the Bible. It's a biblical, spiritual concept, theological concept. When you are faithful with little, he'll give you more. But don't be asking God, would you bless my finances when you have to eat every night of the week, all right? Like, that's not, God ain't going to bless that. God, would you bless when I got so many subscriptions, I got subscriptions to stuff. I got subscriptions to subscriptions. I don't even know. No. When you're faithful with what he's given you, and don't complain. Well, Ruth could have said, well, when I have my own field, I'll be faithful. When I get recognized and appreciated for what I bring to the table, when it's my time to shine, I'll be faithful. No, Ruth says, I don't care if anybody knows my name. I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for him. I'm going to be faithful when nobody's looking, when everybody's looking. And if I'm faithful with a little, God will give me more. Be faithful with what he's already given you. Look at verse 4 through 7. While she was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you," he said. "The Lord bless you," the harvesters replied. Then Boaz asked his foreman, "Who is that young woman over there? Who does she belong to?" And the foreman replied, "She is the young woman from Moab who came back with Naomi. She asked me this morning if she could gather grain behind the harvesters. She has been hard at work ever since, except for a few moments of rest in the shelter." Remember, he's a mighty man of valor. Why? He greets his employees with a blessing. Boaz doesn't roll up on his white stallion horse and say, "The boss is here." He doesn't roll up and say, "Hey guys, we're getting behind on the quota. Let's go. Let's work harder. Where are you guys at? Why are you taking a break?" He doesn't roll up and say, "Guys, you're missing here. You missed some grain here. You messed up over there." No, he greets them with a blessing. Whether you're the leader at your job or the leader of a team, or whether you just got hired Friday at 3 o'clock before closing time, regardless, when you go into that place, do you pray God's blessing over where you work? Because look, that's why God has you there. You pray God's blessing over your work. Well, I don't know anybody. I'm the lowest guy. It doesn't matter. You pray God's blessing on that place. That, Father, as long as I'm here, would you bless this place? That, Father, would you bless it so that the boss, who may not even know my name, the other employees around, that they would come to see your faithfulness. They would come to see that this place is blessed, God, because I'm here. Not because I'm the best, but because your hand is on my life. Pray God's blessing over where you work daily. I pray God's blessing over you. I pray God's blessing over this property daily. Greet them that way. And then I love this. This is fascinating to me. Verse 5. Then Boaz asked his foreman, "Who is that young woman over there? And who does she belong to?" I think he probably said it like that. I don't know, but that's what. And if I was the foreman, I'd probably get fired. But if I was the foreman, I'd be like, "Boaz, grain ain't the only thing being picked up today. Am I right, brother? Okay, just whoa. I mean, all right, the Lord really bless you too, Boaz." So it's fascinating. And here's why this matters. Because God blesses godly character. Your character matters because God blesses godly character. Look at verse 8. Boaz went over and said to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter, stay right here with us when you go gather grain. Don't go to any other fields. Stay right behind the young women working in my field. See which part of the field they are harvesting, and then follow them. I have warned the young men not to treat you roughly. And when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water they have drawn from the well." Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. "What have I done to deserve such kindness?" she asked. "I am only a foreigner." "Yes, I know," Boaz replied, "but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother and your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done." "I hope I can continue to please you, sir," she replied. "You have comforted me by speaking so kindly to me, even though I am not one of your workers." As we said last week, one of the biggest words in all of Ruth and really all the Old Testament is a Hebrew word called hesed. And the best translation, that we don't have an accurate one-for-one translation in English, the closest we have is kindness. But it's not like, "Well, I helped you unload the groceries, that's kindness." Well, not really. I mean, this idea conveys, it's a heavy, heavy word that conveys the idea of unrelenting, loyal love and faithfulness. When you can't ever pay it back, when you can't ever give it back, that faithfulness and loyal love through the highs and the lows of life. That's hesed. And notice all the events of chapter 1 are now beginning to be flipped and reversed. In chapter 1, it is Ruth that tells Naomi, "I'll follow you, I'll serve you, I'll be faithful." In other words, I'm going to give you hesed. I'll be faithful through the highs and the lows. And now she says to Boaz, "What have I done to deserve your kindness, your hesed to me?" And he says, "I heard about your kindness to your husband that died and your mother-in-law." And in other words, what he's saying is, "Girl, you reaping what you sow." That because you were faithful in a foreign land and now you're faithful in this land as well. When you're faithful, I heard about it. You reap what you sow. The New Testament's clear on that as well. That when you are kind and it is of no benefit to you, you're just being generous to be generous and you're being faithful to be faithful, that will come back to you. The New Testament's clear. You reap what you sow. And here's what's fascinating to me, that although Boaz, notice that he said earlier, who is that girl over there? Who does she belong to? And then when he has an interaction with her, he says, I heard about you. So at first, he saw her, but he didn't recognize her because he'd never seen her before. That makes sense. But then he had heard about her before he ever really saw her, which tells me this. Her reputation and her character entered the room before she ever did. Be careful in your life. You got to understand that your character and your reputation will enter the room long before you ever set foot in that. Because notice he says, I'd never seen you, but I heard the buzz in Bethlehem was about you. This foreigner who gave everything behind to serve this lady even though she couldn't pay it back. I heard about that. The most valuable thing that Ruth had was not her connections because she didn't have any. It was not her money because she didn't have any. The most valuable thing that Ruth had was her reputation. Your reputation and character precedes you. The other thing is, notice that when Boaz kind of checks up on her, he's like, who is that? And the employee responds with, I don't know, but she's lazy. I don't know, but she's taking up resources. No, the foreman responds and says, well, you know, she's a foreigner, but man, she's been hard at work. In other words, her actions backed up her character. Your character through text messages, emails, phone calls, enters a room before you do, social media posts before you do. But then when you do get in the room, do your actions back it up? That I am a hard worker. I am faithful. I am loyal. I am committed. Like, let's not just be known as great reputation, but what backs up the reputation and character is the hard work to prove it. That's what Ruth does. Ruth's character remains the same wherever she goes, whatever she does. She's consistent. Ruth, if I'm in Moab as a foreigner, I'm going to be faithful, be consistent. When I'm in Bethlehem, I'll be faithful, be consistent. When I'm working in the field with nobody, I'll be faithful, be consistent. Be consistent. Don't be, on Monday, I'm in the dumps because it's Monday, and I hate Mondays, and I don't like Monday. But man, by Friday, I'm the happiest person in the office. I just love, no. You be consistent. When everybody knows you, when nobody knows you. Be consistent in your character at all times, in front of all people. It matters. Look at verse 14 to 18. At mealtime, Boaz called to her, come over here and help yourself to some food. You can dip your bread into the sour wine. So she ate with his harvesters, and Boaz gave her some roasted grain to eat. She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. When Ruth went back to work again, Boaz ordered his young men, let her gather grain right here among the sheaves without stopping her, and pull out some of the heads of barley from the bundles and drop them on purpose for her. Let her pick them up, and don't give her a hard time. So Ruth gathered barley there all day, and she went to beat out the grain that evening. It filled an entire basket. And she carried it back into town and showed it to her mother-in-law. Ruth also gave her the roasted grain that was left over from her meal. Remember how chapter 1 ends with Naomi saying, God has abandoned me, he's forgotten me, I feel like I'm cursed, God's fist is raised against me, I'm Mara, I'm bitter. And yet Ruth was there faithful the whole time. And now this is beginning of springtime. In other words, this was the break that they both needed, the new beginning they both needed in their life. Naomi goes from being, I'm empty, I left full, but God brought me back empty, to now her stomach is full again, and there's baskets left over. Everything is beginning to be reversed. And I know that emotionally she's still maybe a little empty, she's still mourning, but we're about to see she's about to change her tune really quickly. But she was empty a few days ago, and now she's full again. When it says that she gathered enough wheat and barley that it's enough for about 30 to 50 pounds. I mean, this was enough that would have lasted them for many, many more weeks, I mean, more than enough. I mean, just notice the favor of Boaz. Hey, give them extra on purpose. Here's the big thing we need to do, the big takeaway. Be faithful in your character. Be faithful in your character. Look at verse 19. Where did you gather all this grain today, Naomi asked. Where did you work? May the Lord bless the one who helped you. So Ruth told her mother-in-law about the man in whose field she had worked. She said, the man I worked with today is named Boaz. May the Lord bless him, Naomi told her daughter-in-law. He is showing his kindness to us as well as to your dead husband. That man is one of our closest relatives, one of our family redeemers. We'll talk about that more next week. Then Ruth said, what's more, Boaz even told me to come back and stay with his harvesters until the entire harvest was complete. Good, Naomi exclaimed. Do as he said, my daughter, and stay with the young women right through the whole harvest. You might be harassed in other fields, but you'll be safe with him. So Ruth worked alongside the women in Boaz's field and gathered grain with them until the end of the barley harvest. Then she continued working with them throughout the wheat harvest in early summer. And all the while she lived with her mother-in-law. These two, the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, about 7 weeks, about 7-8 weeks. So kind of mid-April to mid-June, somewhere in there. And during that time, notice it says it 2 or 3 times, she's working. She's working. She's being faithful. I think this is fascinating. This isn't the whole message. I think it's a quick side note that is really important to point out. Because notice Boaz says it, and then Naomi says it as well. Almost word for word, they repeat each other. Anytime the Bible repeats itself, you got to pay attention. But notice Boaz and Naomi say the same thing. Stay in this field. Don't go into other fields because you'll be harassed. In other words, Ruth, I know at times it might look like there's more grain over there. The benefit package is better over there, and they might appreciate you more over there, but don't. In other words, bloom where you're planted. Stay where God has you. God picked this field for you to be in. Stay where God has you and just be faithful all the way to the end. But on the other hand, remember chapter 1, verse 1, the severe famine. They had to leave. 10 years ago, these very fields that Ruth is harvesting with Boaz and his employees, 10 years ago, they were fallow. They were dry. They were as hard as bronze. And 10 years ago, the ground wouldn't produce anything. And the family had to leave. They couldn't stay. Now they're being told to stay, but before they were being told to leave. Listen, you got to know through prayer what season God has you in. Because God could be telling you at the place where you work, stay here. I know it may not be pretty. I know that you may think the grass is greener over there. They have a better benefit package and they're going to appreciate you more. But I don't want you to go over there. I want you to stay here. Bloom where you're planted. Be faithful where I've got you. But for some of you, it may be a famine at where you're working. And God is gently trying to tell you, hey, it's time to move. It's time to polish the resume. It's trying to make some phone call. It's trying to go to the next place I have for you. Well, how do I know the difference, Brian? Through prayer. Through prayer. God, would you have me stay where I'm at? Because if you will, I'll bloom where I'm planted until you tell me to move. I'll stay right here. Others of you, as you pray, God might say, yeah, it's time to move. It's time to take that other job. You know that through prayer. The other thing that I found interesting, we talked about this last week. At the end of chapter 2, Naomi is trying to get Ruth to leave, right? I mean, she's like, hey, just go back home, go back home. Says it 2 or 3 times. And Ruth is, no, be faithful. And now, the very relationship she was trying to discard as now the relationship that ends up feeding her belly and saving her. Be careful, the relationships in your life, they're like, well, I don't need that person anymore. Well, they're of no benefit to me. I don't need, I kind of outgrew them. They outgrew me. Be careful the people that God has ordained and strategically placed in your life, that in your darkest moment, you may not see it straight because of the bitterness like she did at that point. But now God is using the very relationship that she was trying to get rid of. Now it's saving her life. Because had Ruth said, okay, if you don't really want me, I'm leaving, then Naomi certainly would have starved to death in Bethlehem. Be careful with those relationships. Well, as we always say, the message of Jesus is on every page of the Bible. It's all about him, what we call the gospel, the death, resurrection, and forgiveness of sins of Jesus alone through faith in him. It's on every page. Every story is pointing to him. And we said it's all over Ruth, not just because, it's the great-great-grandma of Jesus. That's certainly part of it, but I see it all over chapter 2, if you look. Ruth is this foreigner who doesn't deserve anything. She doesn't have anything of value, of worth. She doesn't bring anything important to the table. And yet when she meets Boaz, he lavishes his blessing on her. When you come to the cross of Jesus, when you have a relationship with him, that's exactly what happens. I mean, you don't bring him, hey, Jesus, here's my money. Does that impress you? Here's why you should love me. None of that. No, when you come to him, it's, I have nothing to give you but myself. And then he says, that's all I've ever wanted. And when you give him your life, he doesn't just say, hey, here's enough for today. Here's enough grace. Here's enough forgiveness. Here's enough love just for today. No, he lavishes it on you abundantly, more and more than enough. But notice, remember what we read, Ruth's response? I think it was verse 15. Ruth didn't say, oh, well, man, thank you. That's awesome. I'm in now. I'm in the inner circle, and I'm good. I'm protected now. I'll just kind of coast. I'm not going to work as hard. Why would I? I mean, you said you're going to take care of me. I'm good. No, Ruth notices over and over, she went back to work. She went back to work. She fell at his feet and thanked him warmly, it said. In other words, it endeared her more to Boaz. I believe she worked all the harder as a result of his grace that he showed her. We don't earn our relationship with Jesus. That's not what we're saying. But for me, when Jesus says, if you love me, you'll obey my commands, I'm not a Christian because I was raised in a Christian home. I'm not a Christian because I'm a pastor, and I'm not a pastor because I'm a Christian. I love Jesus for one main reason, and that is, as the New Testament says, when I was a sinner and an enemy of God and far from him and dead in my sin, he loved me anyway, and he forgave me and changed my life. And as a result, I give my life to him. I give my family to him, my money to him, my time to him, my future to him. It makes me want to love him and serve him all the more. That's the response of the cross. It's not, oh, I gave my life to Jesus and I'm good. I mean, that's kind of like part of it. But now it's, I love you all the more. And I'm going to serve you and be faithful and love you even more. It endears you closer to him. And just like Jesus, Boaz doesn't give the bare minimum. Boaz could be like, hey, Ruth, how much do you need just for today, for you and Naomi? Okay, that's all you get. No, it says Boaz lavished. He purposely left some over. And then at the noontime meal, that she ate all she wanted, and there was some leftovers. So much so she had that basket of 30 to 50 pounds that would feed them for many weeks left. Again, when you come to the cross, Jesus doesn't say, hey, here's just enough. No, he gives you abundant grace, abundant love, abundant mercy. As well, the only account, the miracle of Jesus that is recorded in all four of the accounts of his life in the New Testament of the Bible, called the Gospels, the only miracle that's mentioned in all four, we've mentioned it almost every week here, it's when Jesus feeds, it says 5,000. Now that's 5,000 men, so we're assuming those men, most of them are married, they had kids, so easily 20 to 30,000 people. And he feeds all of them with 5 small pita loaves of bread and 2 small fish. And it says every person, 20, 30,000 people, ate until they were full. They were stuffed. It was Thanksgiving. And there were 12 baskets left over. And at the end, in John chapter 8, Jesus stands up and says, I am the bread of life. Just as your physical stomach is satisfied now. I mean, you can't take it anymore. You're so full. They're going to have to roll you out of this place. That's what I'll do for you spiritually if you'll taste of me and have a relationship with me. That's the gospel. And what's amazing is, because of the character of one person, everybody else in the story gets blessed. Because of the faithfulness and character of Ruth, Boaz is going to be blessed. We'll see that in the next couple weeks. Naomi right here is blessed. She says that, may God bless him, because of Ruth's faithfulness. I mean, Naomi attributed nothing to this story, but she's blessed because of Ruth's faithfulness. That's the gospel. We are blessed because of what Jesus did on the cross. We attributed nothing, but we get to receive and participate in his grace and mercy because of his faithfulness. And I want to give you that opportunity right now. Let's pray. Father, we thank you.